Ladies and gentlemen, presented by GM Fleet, welcome to Industry Disruptors, How to Lead versus Follow. Please welcome Emmy Award-winning TV personality, writer, global consultant, and one of the leading women in the field of technology, Katie Linendoll.
Good morning, everyone. Are we feeling good? You're like, ask me in like 4 more coffees. I get it, it's early. Congratulations on making it here early this morning. As noted, my name is Katie Linendoll, and just a little bit about my background. I have always had a huge fascination in technology. I started coding when I was 12, 13 years old. I had my networking certifications by 18, and I have a degree in information technology new media from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And as you can imagine, these days I continue to be very fascinated and focused on the world of consumer tech. And I am best known for my work on the Today Show, where I've been for the last 7 years. And I'm also a regular contributor to the Weather Channel and also Rachel Ray, as well as consulting with large technology companies across the globe. Like many of you, I am on the road a lot. I traveled last year at count over 300 plus days in the year. And above all, I am a huge outdoor enthusiast and adventurist, and my travels across the globe have taken me everywhere, from underwater diving in Bermuda to Kenya to filming the Northern Lights in Alaska. And I also like to do really crazy stuff. For example, just for fun, a few weeks ago, I went and ran a 10K at night on the ice in Iceland, because that's what I like to do for fun. But I have to tell you, spending the last 24 hours here, I called my mom. My mom was a financial consultant, and she helps me with my finances. And I sent back video of the new Mars Superstar. And she's like, don't you dare get any ideas, because instead of my Manhattan apartment, I would much rather be taking that baby out on the road. So awesome stuff, and continue. I'll be walking around all day. Come say hi. And it's been fascinating getting a huge education on your guys' world. But one of the coolest things I do in my space is I get to speak with some of the most interesting minds in technology. And that is what we're going to do right here, right now. And I'll be introducing 2 of our panelists. They're going to come have a seat, and then we're going to have a little chat on all things disruption. And without further ado, shall we go for it? Awesome. I want to first introduce Omar Johnson. Omar's credentials are kind of insane. Omar is a marketing and branding keynote speaker, entrepreneur, former CMO at Beats by Dre, and former VP of marketing at Apple. At Beats, he was responsible for brand development, advertising, retail experience, and digital marketing for all global brand marketing and advertising efforts. Adweek actually named him Brand Genius in 2013, and Business Insider named him one of the most innovative CMOs in 2016. Please welcome to the stage, Omar Johnson. Thank you, Omar. Next up is a passionate serial entrepreneur and disruptor. Uri Levine co-founded something you might know a little bit about, Waze, the world's largest driving, traffic, and navigation app, of course. And the app is now used by more than 250 million drivers around the globe. It was acquired by Google in June of 2013 for $1.1 billion. Now, since that time, he's actively pursued his dream to create a great value for large audiences through the series of startups he's founded. And his vision is specifically intended to disrupt inefficient markets and improve under-functioning services focused on solving big problems. Please welcome Uri Levine.
Hey, Omar. How you doing?
So this is fun. I call this the hot seat. Obviously, we heard the resume bullets. They speak for themselves. But what I'd love to do is just give each of you a few minutes, personally and professionally. Just, Omar, starting with you, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your experience on the brand side, but also what you're passionate about.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So my name's Omar. I'm from Brooklyn. Grew up in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, New York. Went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. Started, anybody from Atlanta?
Someone was from Atlanta.
Georgia?
All right.
Went to Atlanta for school. Started consulting with companies like Coca-Cola. So I started with Coca-Cola a long, long time ago. Ended up going to Nabisco and working on Chips Ahoy. Campbell Soup. Lived in Philadelphia and worked in Campbell Soup. And then I got recruited to a company called Nike. And I spent a lot of time there on advertising, launching new products, and a little bit of technology with Nike Plus. And then I got a phone call from a startup called Beats by Dr. Dre. And I was third employee at a headphone startup. A lot of my friends at Nike thought I was crazy when I left. I was leaving Nike advertising, working with LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, and being on television every 3-4 months. And I was going to a startup with this much budget, this many commercials, which is zero. And we were charged with sort of building something. I mentioned to you earlier when I got to the category, the headphone category was about a $700 million category, right? So think about it. If we got 50% market share, it's still not a very big success compared to where I came from. But we started with a really different point of view on headphones and how to use headphones. And from there, we built a team. I built a pretty cool team. My team was 55% female, so we had a pretty diverse team. We were black, white, Asian, Hispanic, purple hair, blue hair, no hair, tattoos, you name it. I wanted the team to look as if you went to Venice or Times Square and you picked 100 people. I wanted our team to look that way. So we built that team. I think a big part of our rapid success were the women that were in our group. We had some amazing women in our group. And in the first 4 years, the category for us jumped from about the category when I got there was 700 million. When I left, the category was about 10 billion. So we actually ended up doing way more for the rest of the category, just as much as we grew our brand. So that was the Beat story. I can go deeper.
We're going to go way deeper.
Okay, let's go.
Hold tight, but I do have one. I'm listening to you because I'm learning a lot as we're just chatting. And I hear startup, Beats by Dre, and I'm like, well, come on, man. That's a big name behind that. You'd think just having that powerhouse name behind it in itself, it's almost like, does that really play in the startup category?
Yeah, it's interesting. Right? I think celebrities have thrown their name in different hats. And I think, you've seen some of the companies come, you've seen them go. The ones that have transcended time have been the ones where there's a celebrity and then there's people that help take that thing to somewhere else, right? Because Dr. Dre is Dr. Dre. He's iconic. He will never not be Dr. Dre. And that's what he means in music. To extrapolate that into what it means in headphones took some different muscles. And I think that's what we added to the table. But to your point with Dr. Dre, it's always, look, I get questions every day around endorsements and celebrities. And I tell people every day, endorsements are actually easy to get a deal done. It's hard to extrapolate the value out of that deal and to take that thing and build on top of it. Right? But getting a deal done is it's math, right? Mm-hmm. What are you going to charge me? Do we get to a number I can afford? I sign the contract, you sign the contract. People think that's the end. That's the beginning. It's what you do with that name and how you take it somewhere else that's meaningful. And I think a lot of companies fail at that.
And we'll also dive into how the authenticity is key to any endorsement. And we'll share some good examples and bad examples, but it's not always to your point. Once you sign that endorsement deal, we can tell you from behind the scenes, it just begins.
Yeah, and it's also, at that point, it gets you a good press release, but it's pretty meaningless after that press release. It's what you do with it that means something, so we'll talk about it.
Cool. Yuri, over to you.
So thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Question, if you are using Waze, raise your hand for a second.
Waze?
I've got 2 phones with Waze.
So this is a lot of people. And the interesting part is that Waze is just the beginning, right? And so we were acquired by Google in 2013. And you would expect one of the founders that left the day after to buy one of those and actually retire, right? But I actually left the day after, literally the day after, in order to build more startups. And what I'm doing since then is building startups that all of them have the mission of making our life better, right? And so I run into big problems and I'm trying to address that, and that could be financial fees that no one knows how much they're paying. And when I was young, my dad once told me that If you don't know how much you are paying, then you are paying too much. And so this is VX that addresses that. Move It, that is exactly like Waze, but for public transportation and actually growing faster than Waze in that sense, and at the rate of 1 million new users every day.
Wow.
And so you're starting to think about it, and you realize that there are missions that are changing the world. When you travel to Europe and you buy goods, you're entitled to get the VAT back. But when you try to do that, you'll see that it never works, right? There are always bad things happen. Long lines at the custom, or the refund office is in a different terminal. And I'm building that in an app that all you have to do is scan the receipt, scan the boarding pass, scan your passport, and get your money back, right? And this is 30 billion euros every year that's left on the table because 95% of the cases people fail to get their money back. When you take your car to the mechanic, if I take my car to the mechanic, whatever they'll say, I'll say, okay, because I don't know, right? I feel helpless there, and I don't like to feel helpless. And if they will tell me I need to replace the carburetor in my car, I would say, okay, replace the carburetor, right? There's only one problem with that. There is no carburetor in my car. They don't build cars with carburetors 2 decades now, right? And so NG is an app running on the smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, telling you what's wrong, and then asking mechanics to quote to repair that. So empower the driver with the knowledge and with the ability to do price comparison. Fairfly, another example, biggest secret in travel. What happened to airfare after you book your flight? Now, you don't know that because no one comparing prices after they make the reservation. Beforehand, you will see that prices are going up and down all the time, right? They're going up and down based on the demand. And then you make the reservation, and then what happened to the prices? They keep on going up and down all the time. And so Fairfly monitors your own itinerary, and if the price drops and drops below cancellation fees, you're actually leaving money on the table. I don't like to leave money on the table, so you can rebook the same flight at the cheaper price. And I keep on building those. I wouldn't ask how long does it take you to file your return every year, because I just built something in Israel that it takes 3 minutes. That's it. Average 3 minutes to file the return. Turn out that the longest and most complex part of it is actually obtaining all the information, but all the information is available in different places, so we obtain that. And in general, I would say if you try to build something that is simple, then you'll figure out that in order to make it simple for the user, it needs to be very complex on the back-end side.
Well, and I wanted to go backwards too, because you're doing so much right now. And when you started with Waze, that was just the beginning. You are a serial entrepreneur creating apps and software that is making it easier for people across the board. You just gave 2 great examples. But I want to go back to Waze, and Omar, maybe you can even chime in, because I find it fascinating, the timeline of GPS in itself. I think we all did. First there was like MapQuest, and you'd have these 20 sheets of paper, 3 of them just to get out of your neighborhood. But we thought that was fascinating. We would go through and we'd get there, and how did we do it? We had all this paper. Then we had the new technology of the GPS, which sounded very Jetsons-esque. You put that in your car, you didn't know which brand to buy, tons of different options in the marketplace. That was impactful at its time. When did you have this moment, this light bulb moment, and say, we could be crowdsourcing information, I need to create Waze? What was your thought process, and when did you, again, have this light bulb moment?
So I live in Israel. Israel is a very small place, right, about the size of Massachusetts, right? And one day we were traveling up north, and by the time we went back from the weekend, then the 2 alternative roads were really crowded, and everyone left before I did. And so I started to call them up to see how is traffic like in this route or this route. And based on that, I realized that I should be taking this route, right? And I realized that, wait a minute, the only thing that I need is someone to be ahead of me on the road to tell me what's going on. And so we decided that we're going to build something that is going to help drivers to avoid traffic jams simply by crowdsourcing all the information.
What year was this?
That was 2006.
The idea sparked.
The idea.
Okay.
And then in 2007, we teamed up and decided that this is what we're going to do. And
Did you really think, though, that users were going to be happy to contribute to this process? And then also on that, why didn't map companies and GPS companies have this idea of crowdsourcing information?
so crowdsource is a matter of belief, right? If I would have a time machine and I will bring us back here into 2007 and I will tell you this is what I'm going to build, most likely you would tell me this will never work, right? Because you're nice. And you will tell me this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard, right? And look, this is 2007, the first version of Waze running on a PDA. Remember?
Oh, yes.
Long time ago, there were dinosaurs, and then PDAs, and then Nokia phones, and today we all have iPhones and Android. This long time ago is 10 years, right? And so we started, and we basically say, the real magic of Waze is not only that we crowdsource the traffic information, we crowdsource the map. So the map is being created as you drive, right? If you drive someplace new, then the road is automatically being created, right? If there is an intersection that no one making left turn, then no left turn is allowed, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street, right? Your computer science, you know that if I can describe things, we can build it, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and only 2 coming the other direction, this is one-way street in Tel Aviv. So this is how we drive. You've seen that, right?
Yes, I did.
And so we basically created a magic that the map is being created out of thin air, right? Out of nothing. And as soon as you do that, pretty soon after that, you can actually generate traffic information and you can start guide people to avoid traffic jams. Now you ask what happened to the first users? The real question should be who were the first users, right? Because they're obviously different, right? If there is nothing on the map and no traffic information, then why should I use that, right? But if you are enthusiastic amateur, you would, right? If you care about GPS, if you care about GIS, if you care about maps, if you basically see the opportunity to control your own destiny here, then you would. And these were the first users.
So and then over to you, Omar, just to expand upon that, you iterated the idea. How many people did you have on the road sourcing those first metrics?
So we built the first version in 2007, and then we realized that this is what we're going to do. And by the end of the year, we had about 700 users. This is it. And they were all...
That's more than I thought. 700 in the first batch?
It turns out that there are a lot of people that care about this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And in Realize, I would tell you that if there is a magazine that deals with any particular subject, then there are enough enthusiastic amateurs.
Great. Back to you on a moment on that. Go ahead, Omar.
I want to build on. So, I think Yuri's done something very similar to what I do through product and technology. I think the way I always look at problems or look at products or communication is, what problem can I solve? What, not only business problem, but sort of emotional problem. And as I listen to you, it's, the navigation companies were making electronic maps. You said it, you solved a very different problem to me. When I grew up, my mom would turn on the news in the morning to watch the traffic and see where the traffic was. With technology, we didn't have these maps in our car, but it still wouldn't tell us where the traffic was. You shortened that time, but you said it in a very simple and pure way, which to me is the magic of what you did, which is, I wish I could have somebody in front of me to tell me where to go. We all want that, right? Whether we're touring, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I'm thinking way back in the days, to maps, to news, you shorten the time, and the very simple proposition was, I wish there was someone out in front to tell me what was going to happen. And that's a very universal need that we all have and want, and your product solves that. And I think a lot of times when I get the question from a lot of, product innovators or product companies, what should I be thinking about? You tend to start with where your category is, maps or navigation, and how do I make it better? Where to me, you started at a very different place. You started with, I wish I had somebody in front of me, which put you, I think, light years in front of a better map, a more interactive map, a 3D map, all of those things that felt like innovation, your product leapfrogged a lot of that because I think you answered a very deep human need that was way bigger than a better map.
Okay, and you're absolutely right. You know, our focus was on the commuters. Yeah. We basically say our mission is to help drivers to avoid traffic jams, right? And this is daily happen, right? So usually we used to use maps when we needed to go someplace that we don't know. Yep. And we changed that paradigm, and we basically say there is no way that you're going to leave the house without figuring out how long it's going to take you to get there.
Agreed. Agreed.
It's interesting to see the dichotomy because you're at two different starting points. You're creating and innovating to solve solution, whereas if we were to flip over and maybe changing gears a little bit, you were dealing with a product, and using the Beats example, headphones have been around for decades since, I mean, I remember using them on a Walkman, I'm dating myself, but how do you take a product that's already been done and give it that spark and that life, and also have people look at it differently as more of a lifestyle?
Yeah. So look, I think we're all in the same business. So Yuri, me, we're all in the same business. And it's how are you finding that deep emotional need of a person and connecting your product with it. And brands who do that well, over time, it typically is not just a utility. You start to add more dimensions to it. So I'll give you the headphone example, right? Mm-hmm. When I got to the headphone category, there were two people who used headphones. There were executives on planes, right? When they used them for noise cancellation. Like Bose was amazing at what they did. You know, you go to retail at Bose and you go to Best Buy, they had a TV and it would play the airplane sound. You hit the button, you hear airplane noise. You put the headphones on, no airplane sound. Mm-hmm. Take them off, had airplane sound. Like it was a magic trick, right? They made like airplane noise go away. So they were really focused on an occasion. They did it really, really well, and people bought the headphones for that. The other population of people that bought headphones were sort of artists and musicians and people who used them for music. Most people didn't really connect with headphones unless you traveled, unless you made music. Well, when I first got the job, so think about it. I go to work first day and I work for Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. I was a marketing manager from Nike and I worked for these two legends, right? So you think headphones, okay, I'm gonna start marketing to music people. Well, they'd kind of done that already. They marketed to every music person you could imagine. They gave them free headphones or they sold them headphones. So that trick was done. I still continued to try to do things in music. And if I did something, somebody at the company, I'm not gonna name any names, would say, oh, I know that person from 10 years ago, I did that deal. Like I got zero credit for the first 3 months for all of my work. And I realized pretty quickly if I wanted to be successful, I had to do something different. And I started looking at our headphones very differently. So I'll give you an example. I'm in Miami, and I tell this story a lot. I'm in Miami in a place called Ball Harbor. I shop. So I knew when you started talking about customs, I know exactly what you was talking about because I stand in that line every time I travel. I digress. So in Miami, I'm in the mall, I'm shopping, which I love to shop. I'm walking and I see this really amazing statuesque lady with these really big Beats headphones on. Obviously, I take note. Right? And I was gonna stop her, but it would have been kind of creepy, like me and a woman, and she was really attractive, so I keep walking. I get maybe 100 feet beyond that, and I see another really amazing, and I think she was Ukrainian, I came to find out, woman wearing these headphones. And I stopped her. I pulled out my business card and I said, I don't want your phone number. I wanna know what song you're listening to. Now, even in trying to be smart, I still asked a very stupid question. I assumed she was listening to music.
Oh.
She said, I don't have anything on. I don't use headphones for music. I use it so the assholes don't try and get my phone number and talk to me. So first, you know, I swallowed it. I'm like, okay, I'll be that guy. But that moment was very powerful for me because what it taught me was that she wasn't using the headphones how I'd ever saw somebody use headphones. It wasn't for the airplane, it wasn't for music. She used them as a tool so she didn't have to pay attention, or she could make eye contact with someone, but she didn't have to acknowledge them because they assumed she was listening to music. She could walk past someone and be almost rude, but she had her headphones on. And when you think about that need to want to like just walk through a crowd of people, so now when my wife is using headphones in her house now, I'm always wondering if there's music or not. And I can tell you, I think it's 50-50, sometimes they're on, sometimes it's off. But we as a brand started marketing to that use case, right? Where again, if you think headphones, most headphone companies are telling you how loud, noise cancellation, decibels, super bass, booming bass, blah, 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 where we started to understand that people were using our headphones to focus and to block out distractions.
Can you give another example? I might putting you on the spot, but one of the guys behind the scenes here said, I saw Omar speaking one time, and he did this example of a commercial that you created off of the same notion, whereas a basketball player, and I don't even know which one, was using it for a similar reason.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think you take her same use case, and we discovered it with athletes first. I knew a few athletes from Nike, obviously, and they would always use music before they got onto the court, the field, the pitch, whatever it may be. And they use music for one of three things. They use music to sort of block out fans, and the fans who say really terrible things about them and about their moms and about getting on their knees. I mean, you saw the news this week, right? There's a lot of stuff that people say to athletes to sort of distract them and really get them off their game. When you think about sports, sports is about rhythm and repetition, rhythm and repetition. They use music to bring them back to those training moments and to that rhythm and repetition. And then the last one, which you wouldn't expect, is a lot of athletes, they travel a lot. Music sort of brings them back home. They use music to bring them back home and to bring them into different moods. Let's go back to the first use case, which is blocking out noise. There was one athlete we spoke with, his name is Mario Balotelli. He was an Italian soccer player. So his name, Mario Balotelli, sounds very Italian, but if you look at him, he looks very African. And he is African by birth, but naturalized and lived in Italy. He'd play for the national team and for a team in Italy. And when he did well and he scored goals, the crowd would cheer and chant. When he did things that the crowd didn't like, there were things like people would make monkey sounds and they would jeer him. There were even incidents where people would throw things like banana peels on a pitch. And when I spoke to him, he said, I use the headphones to block out all of the negativity around me. I took that conversation and I asked a couple of other athletes, one being Kevin Garnett, about it, and he said, Omar, what are you talking about? He's like, all of us use headphones. It's like armor. We use it as armor as we walk into events, as we walk into moments where, if you think about the essence of sports, you're walking towards another person who's set to defeat you, who's like playing that whole day, night, week, whatever it may be, to defeat you. Think about boxing at its essence. There's somebody who's walking towards you who technically wants to knock you close to death. And they use these headphones to block out a lot of what's happening around them to focus. And we told that story. And we told that story through football, through basketball, through you name the sport, rugby, cricket. We told the same narrative. But again, we weren't talking about bass and sound and noise cancellation. We talked about armor and protection. So, I'm sure nothing scares Yuri, but if you're walking into a moment where, you want to remarry or, who knows what it may be, and you want that focus, you may use headphones. If you're walking to a big keynote, right? But it answers that really deep emotional need versus the functional, I have sound and music in my ears. Back to my stupid question with that lady, what song are you listening to, right? I think I'm being smart where I'm saying like, oh, playlists are really cool, tell me your playlist. I'm asking the wrong question, right? But if you get to the deeper need, there was something deeper there.
Ultimately, I want you to close this loop, and Yuri, I want you to chime in, because you've now addressed differentiating yourselves with that example in one narrow way, how you've differentiated yourself in the industry. Because we sit here, and in the RV industry almost has to differentiate itself between all the outdoor space. It's competing in that space. What would you say from your experience?
I think what this category has to do is, we did it very similar at Beats, where I told my team, we're not competing with Bose or Sony, we're competing from a lifestyle perspective with an iPhone and a pair of Jordans. So when I think about this 16-year-old and how he drives a lot of influence both upwards and downwards, I wanted to find, like I said, look, if we're competing with headphones in a $700 million category, we'll be small, right? But if we're competing with Nike, if we're competing with Apple, that's a pretty big aperture. And when you think about what we were doing, we wanted to enter that consumer's lifestyle, right? And that means a whole lot of different things. Every other headphone company made a very common color, black, maybe silver, maybe white. We had magenta, we had purple, we had pink, we had yellow. We built it as something just like Jordans or sneakers, where you don't have one pair of sneakers, one pair of shoes, you have multiple, because it's a lifestyle product. So we put ourselves in that category of lifestyle. And to me, when you look at the more innovative brands, especially now, they're sort of category jumping. They're jumping outside of their category, and they're competing in different ways with different things. Again, I don't think there was anything close to Maps in what Yuri was solving. He was solving a really deep need, which is, think about how many times in life you wish you had someone in the meeting before you to tell you what's gonna happen. Like everything that you do, we just did a walkthrough before we did today. Like we put ourselves in a place of being before. So again, I just think there's something magical in what he was solving, which is way deeper than traffic and maps. And I think as I look around the room and look at these products, especially I look at the team tailgate thing back there. I mean, for a guy with low self-esteem, that's a great product. Right? A guy that doesn't have many friends, that's called the instant friend maker. Right? So
What does it say about me that was one of my favorites?
I don't know. It says about you. It says you're looking for an adventure, but
I'm just kidding.
again, I think it solves. It seems like it solves a tailgate problem. It solves something way different, right? Again, if I've got, not a lot of friends, or I want to really show my team pride, that's the way to do it.
In these early stages of knowing that you have something and that you could potentially disrupt the market, I have to tell you, I mean, the amount of pitches I get as a journalist on a daily basis, we know there's a lot of noise. But when you're starting something like this, you're onto it. You have this team around you, and it may be small. I mean, it was crazy to hear that you were the third employee over at Beats. That's nuts to me. Like, I would assume that you started grandiose. How do you get your team excited and say, I got something here?
So, it's interesting because you look at disruption, and disruption happens when you look at a market or at a problem from a different point of view, right? Exactly like you described, a different point of view, not what Sony and Bose are doing, a different point of view. And this is critical in order to actually change the market. When we started, we had the right mission, right? So as long as you have the right mission and the right problem you are trying to address, and you build the right team around you, then you know that this team will go through the hardship of the journey in order to address that. And at the beginning, it was challenging, right? Because you basically say, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and it doesn't work, right? You tend to think that, okay, we figured that out, but the figuring out is a journey of failures. And you fail every day, and this is the journey of a startup. You fail every day again and again and again, and you get up in the morning simply because the mission is right and the team is right.
Is there anything that you found in the creation process that was I have to put my ego aside, something about the business model is not working? I hate to use a tech buzzword, but we got to pivot here.
So pivot is a definition of, okay, this is a major fuck up on the underlying assumptions.
Or is there any major fuck ups that you've experienced in the past?
I got a ton, a lot.
All the underlying assumptions don't work, right? Now, if you start with the problem, and the problem is still there, the underlying assumption is still there, right? So you're trying to solve a problem. You fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And you keep on iterating, trying to improve. And there are, out of 10 iterations, 9 of them will be baby step progress, and 1 of them will be leapfrog. And you don't know which one, right? If you would know, then you will make only those, right? And so you keep on trying until you figure that out. And this is, by the way, this is consistent to all the startups in the world until they figure out product market fit. Because if you look at all the products that you are using, all the applications that you have on your first page of your smartphone, and you try to think about them, okay, what is the difference between the application that I'm using today and the first time that I've used that? And there is no difference. The first time that you have used that is when they figure out product market fit. And since then, they don't change, right? You search in Google the same way that you did the first time that you searched in Google. You use Uber the same way that you do. You use Waze the same way that you do. And getting into product market fit is a long journey. We tend to think about it, okay, so they figured that out and this is it, but it takes years to get there.
Omar, I know you want to chime in on this.
No.
Oh, no. Did you have something to say on that?
No, I'm just leaning in.
Oh, go ahead. And can I bring up, so it's one of my pet peeves in the tech world. So many times that Uber is used as an example, and it drives me insane, but I feel like I have to bounce off of that for a moment because it's always tied to Uber and disruption, Lyft and disruption, Uber and disruption, and rightfully so. I mean, I've been cumulatively in New York for at least a decade, and I never thought that the New York icon of a cab would go away.
Oh, I do.
And you do. Speak to me here because I see the pros and cons of Uber as a user and also on the business side, but you said something profound, that disruption is always a good thing, and you utilize that Uber example, and maybe you can dive in.
Well, it's perspective, right? So, to your point, to you living in a city, yellow cabs, think of every great New York opening movie shot. Yellow cabs, Times Square, hover above shot, get to the streets, but yellow cabs, right? The yellow cabs meant something very different for you than it meant for me. So where'd I grow up? Brooklyn. I'm a black guy. Getting a yellow taxi to go to Brooklyn late at night, impossible, okay? You think of 90s, you think even 80s, 90s, you had a lot of not great stuff happening in Brooklyn. It was tough for me to get a taxi. I got pictures. It's funny, I was looking at one maybe about a month ago, me standing in front of a fire station. This is right after 9/11. Hand up, in a suit, can't get a taxi, right? So I had a very different experience from you. So I kind of kicked myself in moments where I wasn't one of the first people into Uber because I knew there was something very deep that I needed out of a taxi, like just to get from A to B. And I felt like I was always last in line, even when I was first in line to get a taxi. Depending on where I was going, how I was dressed, who I was with, literally determined how much time I'd wait for a taxi. If it's 3 black guys standing outside to go to Brooklyn, way longer than if it's just me by myself. Me by myself with a suit. So me with the woman with the suit, a little bit shorter, right? But this is the old way of getting a taxi. So here's a magical Uber. Same time, I see what time the taxi's gonna come and it shows up. So for me, it was something very different. It answered something very powerful in me, which was, I've got money, I wanna get where I wanna get to, yet I tend to have an issue when I'm standing there trying to wave a flag down because of who I am and how I look. So I know you don't wanna go here, but this is what
You're
Uber
actually
meant
making
for
me think.
me. Right.
Because go ahead, Yuri.
So we think sometimes about, okay, this is disruptive technology, right? Technology has nothing to do with disruption. Disruption is changing the way we are doing things. At the end of the day, changing market equilibrium. That could be a result of a new product that is being introduced, a new price, right? If you are using Gmail, raise your hand, right? Everyone is using Gmail, right? Gmail, the revolution of Gmail is it was free. Before that, we used to pay for the inbox. We used to get it from the internet service provider, and we used to pay that. As soon as you introduce something that is free, the market changes. Maybe it's a new business model. Maybe it's a new information that is being created in the market. Uber created new information for drivers.
Is there something to be said in a common thread, though, in relevant to RVs, that the consumer on demand and having that instantaneously at your fingertips, the accessibility is powerful?
The accessibility is always powerful, right? Because we always prefer the simplicity. But here is the thing, right? And so you look at the market today, and the market of on-demand trips is 10 times bigger than it was before. 10 times bigger market simply because Uber introduced a new way to actually deliver information to the drivers and increase the number of drivers, and as a result, change the market equilibrium. And you look at it and you ask yourself, okay, so what does it mean in terms of disruptions of other markets? Or maybe beforehand, how can they not see that, right? When disruption happens, how can the map makers cannot see what we are doing, right? How can Sony and Bose cannot see what you're doing? Now, the reality is that disruptors are always newcomers. They are the ones that have nothing to lose, right? When you started, you have nothing, right? So what exactly am I going to lose? My market share, my zero market share? That's not a problem to lose that.
Right.
And so you come with a different approach, not because you necessarily believe that it's going to work, but because you basically say, in the existing approach, I have no way to compete. Yeah. And the result is that in all cases, they don't see that coming. Right? You think of Netflix and Blockbuster, right? Yep. Actually, Netflix has asked Blockbuster to acquire them twice, and they say no. You think of iPhone, the first version of iPhone, and Microsoft saying, okay, this is never going to catch up. No one cares about flat screen. Everyone wants keyboard, right? Well, surprise, it's not the reality, right? And existing players in the market cannot see revolutions coming, cannot see disruption happening to their market. Now, if you think about the future, and I look at all these RVs around me, and I'm starting to ask myself, not what is the threat for the market of disruption, what is the opportunity for the market? And you start to think about, okay, autonomous vehicles, what exactly it's going to do to us, right? Yep. And you basically say, okay, wait a minute, if there is a car that can drive by itself, then maybe I don't need to own a car. Yep. Maybe I need to have an app in my phone that I click on that, car shows up, I tell the car, take me wherever, car takes me there, I click on the app again, car disappears, right? Now, if this is the case, then maybe I don't need to buy a car. I need to subscribe to a service like that. I'm going to pay per use, whether or not this is time of use or mileage or something else, and I change the business model on the demand side. Now, here comes the second part of it, right? Just imagine that those RVs can drive by themselves, right? And I can actually have them take me into the city, drop me off, and I will go to my meeting, right? I don't need to have hotel room in the city.
You got the hotel room right inside there.
I can have one of those, drive automatically. My biggest problem today would be, okay, so I get into the city with those, and what do I do with them, right? They don't hide into my pocket, right? But if I can snap my finger and they will go away and disappear, then we have much bigger opportunity than just RVs. We have all the hotel industry.
Yep. Yeah, I'm violently agreeing, because I think innovation, the reason why the Sonys didn't catch it and other companies didn't catch it, I think 9 times out of 10, you're asking the wrong question. You're doing the same syndicated research, you're looking at the same data pools, you're looking at the same influencers, you're looking at the same inputs, and guess what happens when you ask those same things for answers? You get the same answers, you get expected answers. You know, what he just tapped on, perfect example. The moment, like, I walked the floor earlier and I fell in love with 3 or 4 different things, right? I love the van because it's small. It's probably, you know, the smallest one, but it's also, it fits in my garage. What if we take the problem of fitting in my garage out, right? To your point of where do you park it? That becomes a huge opportunity for you to sell to me, because that's something I could see. I might actually move up to a bigger product because I don't have to park it in my garage. Again, answer different questions. Like at Beats, I try to answer different questions. I didn't ask, how do I make a louder headphone, the cheaper headphone, better designed headphone, although I think we had great design. I tried to answer that deeper need that no one was asking. And 9 times out of 10, that lives outside of your category. It doesn't live in the spaces that you're used to occupying. It doesn't live with the focus groups you're used to bringing in. You've got to bring in different people, ask different questions. And I think one of the most, toughest parts of any big business is kind of research design. And you can either be really great at it or really, really like not great at it, right? And you just ask basic questions. When I asked that young lady when she was walking in Miami about what she was doing, it wasn't a very well-constructed question. I had a terrible question that was really off base, but I was able to listen. And I think a lot of these brands, to Yuri's point, have failed to sort of listen to people outside of their category. Again, I see a lot of opportunity when I look out here. I don't see RVs. And again, to your point around like autonomous driving, where it's going to go, right? So many companies are selling the joy of driving and the wind in your ear. Like, I don't care about that every day. There's some days where I want to drive and I want to drive really fast and put the windows down. Most days, I want to be on my phone. I want to be on my laptop. I want to talk to my kids. I want to face my kids and my wife and talk to them as I'm driving. So if you start to recontextualize these products around here, they're not necessarily about driving to a destination. They're about, because with autonomous driving, it's everything else that you can do besides drive. And that list is pretty infinite, right? Whether it's study, sleep, work, take a shower, prepare, whatever those things may be. And that's what I look at when I see the products out here. I don't necessarily see, because I don't see myself as an RV guy, but I do see myself as someone who wants to, when I came, I got to go to New York, and I'm in New York tonight for literally 3 hours, and I've got to go somewhere else. I've got to find a way to stop at my hotel, change, put on something different that's warmer, and then go to a party tonight. Well, if I had this to get from JFK to the city, I would easily do this versus the really terrible hotel room. I'm going to go stand in a line, I hate lines, check in, give my credit card number, to literally go take a shower, pack up all my stuff again, and go back out. So again, if you think about different need states and different needs that consumers have, you start to come up with very different answers and very different solutions. And to your point around newcomers tend to be disruptive is because there's this sort of educated ignorance where you don't know a lot of the norms of the category, so you approach things from a very different space, right? I get asked about Casper a lot, right? I think Casper's great. What Casper, I think they're a great product, but what they saved is me going to a store, sitting on a bunch of mattresses, trying to like lay down like I'm going to sleep, but not really sleeping. By the third one, they all feel the same, and then have to hire someone to lug it on a truck, navigate it up my steps, chipping walls, chipping doors, put it in my room, and hopefully I enjoy it. And if I don't, someone's got to do that process all over again, and I've got to go to another store. To me, Casper solves that. Not necessarily a great mattress. I'm not sure how great the mattresses are. But when you think about the inefficiency, the pain of this big, ginormous thing having to be transported somewhere, dragged upstairs, through doors, all the damage it causes, they solve that in a really beautiful and seamless way. So again, I think they attack the problem very differently. It's not like, how do we have the best mattress? How do we take all of that inertia out of mattress buying?
How do you attack the problem of, and actually first I want to say one thing. Has anyone been in a self-driving car? I just want to close the loop on that. Anyone? It's one of the crazier things I've done. And I say that because I think subjectively speaking, and maybe from my own experience, I think it has a few years to go. We were covering a piece for Today's Show in a self-driving car, and we were in Vegas. And one thing I quickly learned is that vehicle was taking cues from the speed limit on the road. So while we were in the vehicle, they failed to tell us that on the off-ramp on the highway, it doesn't change speeds. It still stays at that high speed. So it was gonna take a ramp at around 45, 50 miles per hour. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was a really intense experience. We've had some hiccups in the vehicle. I think it has a ways to go, but I think in terms of getting that time back, it could be incredibly valuable. And I'm interested to see where this, every year it's just,
they've got to watch
autonomous
driving, because autonomous driving is coming for you guys. right? Because autonomous driving creates the opportunity, if you're not driving, to do other things. And that list of things, whether it's sleep, have a meeting, play Scrabble with my kids, study with my kids, just have a great family conversation, all into the conversation. And that's what a lot of these things do. So I think, look, autonomous cars, once you take driving out of it, they're going to be designed differently. They're going to be designed more as capsules, activity capsules, things that you can do things besides driving.
Which would be great for this world,
well,
right?
Again, I think they're coming to this space. You have to project out and get where they're going. And again, this doesn't mean, you know, there's some broad scale adoption of sort of autonomous driving, because I know how many years that takes, but just understanding the need that that's solving and the fact that you're in the same business. So how do you either find pivots, or how do you go head on and go and beat them to the past? Because they can't do comfort, utility, convenience the way you can, because they're cars. And it's typically cars that are being transformed, not these amazing sort of entertainment, you know, venues that you have on wheels.
I want to make sure we get to this due to time. I want to ask you about perception, because I got a huge education that one of the growing sectors in the RV world is millennials. And you, as somebody that knows how to market to different lifestyles and different cultures and different age demographics, how do you capitalize on this opportunity happening right now and this growth of the outdoor explosion? It's a good place to be, right? A good time for RVs right here, right now.
Can you jump in?
So, you know, absolutely, yes. And in particular, if you happen to be in Utah and there is snow around you, then that would be amazing time to go skiing, right? But I think that outdoor is becoming more and more significant to many of us, not just as an escape, but actually as something that we can do together with the family, with friends, and the creation of the environment for that is dramatic now. How do you make that accessible to much more people? Mm-hmm. You know, as long as we think of the market, here are the people that are buying RVs, and they might be, you know, 10% of the population, and this is the addressable market, then we are missing the point. Yep. We should be addressing 90% of the population by figuring out what is it that they need, what is it that they want, so we can address much more of that. And that could be about sharing economy, that could be, just imagine Airbnb for RVs, right? And I know that there are some, mm-hmm. but if we take that not necessarily for the use case that they have today, but into different use cases, we can increase the market by tenfold.
Yeah.
Hop on that, Omar.
No, I think, you know, he said it very well. And I think, you know, when you think millennials, you know, what I see happening with them is, look, technology's been great for a lot of us. I'm always a bit worried about the amount of people I see who have a device in their hands and they're just using their thumb to navigate their life. And as much as things like the internet have done to create connection with people, I also think it's separated us, because I'll watch 2 people at dinner or 4 people at dinner and they're all on their phones. And when you think about RVs and you think about what millennials want, they're looking to get back to community experiences, back to human touch, back to conversations, back to, and I think it's both, right? They're not saying, no phone, I'm gonna go without a phone, you know, I'm gonna go RVing. I think there's a combination of both.
When do you think that we're hitting this surge where, I think, right to your point, we're having this moment of like getting back to real life?
Oh, because we've lost ourselves in our phones. I mean, I consciously, you know, was really excited about the invention of the screen time, because I'm very conscious of how much time I spend on my phone and not spending eye to eye talking to someone. We got in the car this morning and the first thing we did was said hello and where you from, and we spoke. I've seen that play out 10 million times where people sit there in their phones and they don't talk until they have to speak. And I think millennials are rejecting that because they're seeing how bad that can be as you develop. And I think when you look at opportunities to be connected back to nature, connected. So to me, the opposite of the internet is like the outside, right? You move, you have to go get, you have to create things, you have to be creative. It's not all at your hands, like you actually have to do things. And I think, you know, I'm watching a lot of millennials find opportunities to go into, whether it's environments with less technology or places where they can have more, you know, communication and activity. So again, these are perfect examples for me where, you know, if you want to connect with a different audience, they're craving something deeper, which is this connection. And I think that's where this starts to get really interesting.
It's also interesting to note, though, on the virtual reality side, as a proponent that I think that you have to see to believe. If you've never experienced VR, I think it's fascinating. And I've seen so many outdoor companies execute on seeing this experience right here in front of your face is driving people to the outdoors. So there can be kind of this working together component, which is so odd. I mean, it's the digital brings the
yeah, and that's why I say it's not exclusively one or the other. I think you can use technology as a sales tool, but at the end of the day, I think people are looking for something deeper and something richer. But if you can use that technology to demonstrate what they're going to experience, you can actually increase people's participation in that activity.
Well done. Let's give it up for Omar and Yuri. Chat with you guys for hours, but everyone, thank you for being a lovely audience, and we are out of time, but of course the Industry Showcase starts at 10 a.m., and make sure you check it out and check out all the latest disruptions and what's there to offer. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Ladies and gentlemen, this